Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating dive into a behavior that is incredibly common, yet, completely misunderstood by most of us. Have you ever wondered why some people literally just vanish off the grid the minute things get tough? It's so baffling when you're on the outside looking in, right? Well, let's just get right into it. We're going to break down the actual psychology of disappearing during crises.
Seriously, take just a second and picture a close friend, a family member, or maybe even your partner. Now, imagine they hit a really rough patch, a massive personal crisis, a huge loss, something incredibly stressful. Naturally, you're waiting for them to reach out to you, to lean on your shoulder, right? But instead, silence. Total radio silence. Where do they actually go when times get tough? Why do they completely vanish the moment they're going through a hard time? It feels super personal, doesn't it? Like you did something wrong? But as our source material reveals today, it's actually not about you at all. It's a deeply, deeply internal.
And this right here perfectly illustrates our core disconnect when it comes to supporting people in pain. On the one hand, we've got our standard societal expectation, asking for help. Society basically drills into us that when you're hurting, you throw out a lifeline. But on the other hand, the reality for these specific individuals is all about protecting mental space. They aren't pushing you away out of spite or anger. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they are aggressively guarding their internal world. They're pulling up the drawbridge just to keep the castle from collapsing entirely. All right, moving into section 1, the sudden disappearance phenomenon. So to really grasp this, we've got to shift our paradigm a bit. We have to look at the actual act of vanishing and understand it not as some character flaw or a sign of weakness, but as a recognized phenomenon. The source defines this as the psychology of the person who disappears when going through a hard time. And the really crucial takeaway here is the validation. This is a documented psychological response to distress. It's not just random aloofness. They aren't just being cold or selfish. When a crisis hits, their mental wiring literally dictates a full retreat. It's a programmed response to overwhelming pressure. Which brings us to section 2, high orientation toward privacy. Okay, so if this is a programmed response, what's actually driving it? Well, it comes down to a high orientation toward privacy. Our source describes this as the tendency of certain individuals to prioritize protecting their mental space over seeking external help during a crisis. Now, I really want you to focus on that word, prioritize. For these folks, extreme privacy isn't just a casual preference or some quirky introvert trait. No way. It is an absolute non-negotiable necessity for their psychological survival. When the pressure mounts, their immediate gut instinct is to lock all the doors and secure the perimeter of their mind. Let's look closer at section 3, protecting the mental space. So we know what they're doing, right? They're prioritizing privacy. But why do they need to guard it so intensely? Well, the concept breaks down into two distinct actions. First, not asking for help, and second, protecting mental space instead. This is a brilliant way to frame it because it flips the script. The refusal to ask for help isn't a failure to communicate, it's an active defensive measure. Imagine their mental space as this incredibly fragile ecosystem right in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane. Letting someone in, even someone with the absolute best intentions, it just feels like opening a window to the storm. It is way too much incoming data, emotional labor, and chaos to process when they are literally already at maximum capacity. Moving on to section 4, early self-reliance. Now, I want to slow down for just a second because to really get this, we need a bit of empathy. Why does someone view outside help as a hurricane instead of a lifeline? We have to dig into the root cause here, and the source hits the nail on the head. Early self-reliance as a survival mechanism. That is a heavy realization. It changes the whole shebang when we think about this disappearing act. This isn't about ignoring friends. It is a deeply ingrained survival strategy that they learned way, way early in life. At some point in their formative years, these individuals learned that the only person they could truly count on to fix a problem or soothe their pain was themselves. They became completely self-reliant because, at one point, they literally had to be to survive. Let's map out exactly how this chain reaction plays out in real time. Boom, step 1, the crisis hits. Then step 2, the fear of temporary support kicks in. We'll dive deeper into that in a second, but it's basically this sudden dread that any help they get won't actually last. Because of that fear, step 3 happens. That old childhood survival mechanism, early self-reliance, fully activates. It overrides absolutely everything else. And finally, step 4, disappearance, total isolation. They withdraw to fix the problem themselves. The current hardship, it's really just a trigger. The reaction itself is probably decades old. And that leads us right into section 5, the illusion of temporary support. This brings us to the biggest, most heartbreaking barrier to connection, the difficulty of trusting support. This is the real tragedy for the people who vanish. It's not that they don't want a helping hand or that they like suffering alone. It's the immense, paralyzing difficulty they face when trying to actually accept that hand. Their learned self-reliance is so incredibly powerful, it just overrides their capacity to trust. Trusting someone else feels like a massive, reckless gamble, and they just aren't willing to take it when they're already feeling that vulnerable. So it's a severe, inverse relationship at play. As their need to rely on themselves peaks during a crisis, their ability to trust outside help totally tanks. It's a seesaw effect, right? They simply cannot hold both high self-reliance and high trust at the exact same time when they're under immense pressure. One just completely pushes the other out. But the difficulty isn't just about trusting the support. It's about support that might seem temporary. Let's unpack this because it is absolutely vital. They don't just fear receiving support, they fear losing it. If they let you in, if they actually allow themselves to lean their weight on you, what happens when you get tired? What happens when you inevitably have to go back to your own life? To them, temporary support is literally worse than no support at all. Why? Because it forces them to drop their carefully constructed defenses, only to be left totally exposed and alone again once that support naturally fades. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. How do we offer support that doesn't feel temporary? If someone you love relies on disappearance as a survival tool, you can't just forcefully kick their door down, right? That's just going to make them add more locks. You have to prove that your presence is consistent, safe, and unconditional, even when they're actively hiding. So here's my challenge to you. How can you build that deeper trust? How can you become a steady constant in their life so that the next time a crisis hits, they might just leave the door cracked open? Take that question with you, reflect on your own relationships, and keep learning. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.